moment while I get things set here. Hey, Mr. Bogfoot, how you doing, sir? Good to have you here. Um, yeah, this looks good. How's everybody doing out there? Welcome to the Upstairs to the Right Music channel. I'm Mike McWilliams. I will be your guide this evening in this discussion that we have. We have a lot of discussions here that have a broad range to them. Generally, in the music realm we stick in, but sometimes we reach into other things. So I enjoy talking about different subjects that relate to the music industry, and I'm so glad to have another here tonight. I always start out my live stream by saying thank you so much for spending a little bit of your time, taking your valuable time to watch, and let's get going here. My feed here is a little weird. I put up a couple of questions in the feed, but they seem to have disappeared. Let me see if I can repose them. Hey, Scott. Hey, Mr. Watson. How you doing? Ben, hey, how you doing? Welcome to you guys. Yeah, let me make a couple of changes here. Um, can I find that? Um, yeah, here it is. I'm going to repin this because I can't find it in my feed right now. I don't know why. I have no idea. So let's put this in here. Yeah. So that's the question tonight. What do you think makes someone a musician? Tools, technique, or musical decisions? Now, by the way, there is no correct answer on this. I just want to hear your answer and how you came to that conclusion tonight. So I put that out there in the chat for you guys to chew upon. Mr. Larson, how you doing? Yes, doing quite fine. I hope you're doing well. Thank you so much for showing up, guys. Yeah, the reason I was a little off was because I was reading news about Studio One. And, I have been using Studio One as my DAW for since 2011, maybe 10, when they first started coming out. So for good, almost coming up on 15 years now, I've been using that thing. And recently, Fender has decided that they are going to change the name of Studio One to, I believe, from what I'm seeing here in the feeds, Fender Studio Pro. And Fender Studio or Fender Studio Pro is the new name. So this is actually interesting news for me because I think rebadging, Personas, they bought Personas, so they're getting rid of Personas, obviously. And rebranding it to Fender is going to be confusing to a lot of people out there that use or are interested in using this product because it raises a lot of questions. Will it still be the same product? And if Fender gets involved, what kind of things might possibly be added to it to make it more enticing to people? Maybe the entire Fender amp catalog is available there if you buy the Pro version. For example, just a lot of possibilities there, but just not. I'm reading a vlog right now, and I'm just trying to get a sense for what people are thinking. Um, a lot of people are giving it a chance that are Studio One owners, from what I'm reading. However, it's quite an interesting thing to have happen. And I have concerns. The positives are there, of course, of what it could mean. The negatives could mean that there could be a complete phasing out eventually of this product. What kind of support are they going to be giving to it? There's a lot of questions there. Again, a reason 999 why I cannot stand recording to a DAW. If I did get back into it, I pretty much will have my eyes set on at the minimum a 24 track, probably 32 track hard disc recorder, and just get all this out of the way, and not have to even deal with this. Um, Scott says, I'm a Steinberg user for good and bad. No, that's an okay one. People used to put down Fruity Loops Studio, but now Fruity Loops has become one of the number one DAWs out there. Primarily because a lot of Afro beats producers and guys like that found that DAW had the sound or whatever the functionality in order to create that kind of music. Um, Michael Watson says I use Studio One also. Yep, Cubase. Scott says 11. And Benny says, I'm so much out of the loop. Benny says, I have no idea what Studio One is. It's a DAW. It's a recording software, that has been around for about 15 years, and I have a history with it. All of my albums were recorded using Studio One since 2011. And it's a pretty good program. I like that it's easy to use. I started out using. I was one of the early adopters of. Gosh, it escapes me right now. It was anyway. I've been using DAWs actually since the early '90s. You know, and so I just prefer hard disk recording. I actually prefer tape recording, but that's not going to be an option. But this news regarding Studio One getting rid of Personas moniker, switching it over to Fender, I don't know. We'll see what happens. We'll see what kind of support I get. What kind of support that you and I get, Michael Watson, going forward using Studio One, because I it's right now it's not so great of a feeling. Not so great of a feeling, but we'll see. We'll see. All right. I think enough people are in the chat now. We get started with this. Yeah, I just saw that news just literally right before I went live here, and I'm digesting it myself, processing it myself as it goes along. Um, let's see here. Where are my notes? Oh well. Speaking of, yes, Ellie, you have something to say? Do you want to go out? Why don't you go out? Because I have to do a live stream now, honey. I can't have you meowing at me while I'm doing a live stream. Come on, let's go. Come on. Oh, this is the cat that I was talking to you, by the way. This is Ellie, guys. Come on, why don't you go out, sweetie? She's a sweetheart. I was watching, speaking of Studio One and Fruity Loops and Afro beats and things of that nature, I was watching a channel that was discussing a subject that I've touched upon a few times myself here. I've jokingly, I've humorously not putting them not putting them down per se, but I make jokes about beat producers, as you guys know. And I don't do that to disparage the entire, subset of people who do that kind of work. Um, but I do question people who don't understand the difference between a beat producer, a beat maker, and a producer. Some guy got on Instagram or some site and made the statement that, is Dr. Dre really a musician, for example? And I was kind of blown away by that because I never saw Dr. Jerry as anything other than a producer. And I think that even now, in this day and age, people have a very interesting conception of what a producer is and what a producer does. And I think that by the end of tonight's discussion, you'll see why, people have a sense of wanting to categorize things and whether these categories make any sense or not, or if there's any truth to them. And the biggest question is being what determines or who gets to be called a musician, you know. So we're going to talk about that a little bit tonight. A little bit tonight. Let me get here in the chat and catch up. I've always been more of a hardware guy, Benny says. Otherwise, it's mostly been Pro Tools. That's the one that was, old man's fog. Pro Tools. Jock and I were, Motown insisted that we use Pro Tools to do the remixes that we were doing for them. And we had to figure that out. We had to figure that one out. That was interesting. So there's that. Steve Jobs from Another Mother. Hey, Vincent, how you doing? Welcome to the chat. Good to have you here, sir. Mr. Matty Two Hats in the house. Hey, how you doing, Matty? Good to have you here. Thank you, man. Always showing up. Thanks for putting that comment down in the last live stream. I appreciate that, man. What is your job? let's not get into that tonight. But let's just say that I have some experience in the music business. Mike Watson says, I have 9 new songs I recorded using Studio One on my other channel. Could you put up a link for that so we can take a look at that, take a listen to that? I'd love to, Michael, if you don't mind, if you may, if you will, if you please. Yeah, who gets to be called a musician? That's the question I want to pose to you guys tonight. Music culture basically has always tried to stick things into categories. It loves categories. But more than that, it loves ranking. Top 10, top 5, top 3. And those rankings, usually denote the best, this is the best music or the worst music, worst songs, best song. And also, when we get into the minutia of it, as musicians, we kind of do that with other musicians. Is what this guy playing real music? Is what this guy doing take real skill? Is this a form or art form that takes shortcuts? And these rankings almost always favor, of course, the viewpoint of the speaker. Or the viewpoint that the speaker is most familiar with as well. A band, for example, what I mean is like a band musician will elevate bands. A jazz musician will elevate jazz. And classically trained players will elevate notation and theory. So these would be the rankings that musicians will put themselves and others into. And depending upon their mindset, they will rank you from best to worst. And we do that. It's just a natural thing. And these distinctions, however, most often masquerade as objectivity. And they're really more emotional, to be honest. They're personal. And the reason I say that is because I was listening to one of my live streams and I was making one of my cracks about beat makers. And I thought to myself, well, that's a kind of a personal thing you may have inside of yourself. Are you jealous of these guys' ability to create these beats? And the answer for me keeps coming back no. Uh, you know, um, because it's a genre that I just have no interest in whatsoever. And that's when I began to realize that, you're whoever it's going to the viewpoint is always going to be subject to the person speaking, and we do that. We do that, and I think that's okay. But once you say something like, "Well, that's not real musicianship," what you're really saying is the skills that I have really worked hard to through practice, through study, through blood, sweat, literally blood, sweat, and tears, uh, to achieve. Um, these are the things that really should matter the most. So, in other words, if I was a classical musician down here at the Concertgebouw, a violinist, and, playing since I was the age of 6, very adapted reading, notation, um, in theory, I would cast a jaded eye to a, hip hop producer, for example, or beat maker, as I call them. No, I mean that's a bad one. There's a distinction there. A beat maker. So they may look down, again, because I'm trying to keep producer a little separate here in the discussion. So that comes from an emotional place. When you're saying the skills that I work most hardest to develop are the ones that are the most important, you've invested, of course, your life into it. So that's an emotional response. And so let's start there. Let's start there from that kind of mindset. This says, what do you think of AI? It's making music already. Well, we've had some discussions on our live streams about in the past about AI and its future on music. I'll briefly state that I learned a neat trick. If you want to see if a song is AI or not, run it through an audio spectrograph. They usually come free with Pro Tools. Studio One has one. I know a few of them. Run it through that, and you'll notice something that in the high range of the cue, it completely flatlines. There's none of that leakage. There's none of those peaks and spikes that you would get in a non AI song, and that's a neat trick to learn if to figure out if a song is AI or not. But it's also very telling of the dumbing down of the EQ spectrum when it comes to AI music. It lacks true dynamics. If you notice that, sounds good, but it's always kind of like here. And so no, I just don't see a good thing with that. I wish AI would help me set up my gain levels. I hear you, man. This says my friend is a hardstyle DJ, but he doesn't like to party. It's like a chef that doesn't want to cook at home. Hey, man, he sounds like to me like a guy who's gonna have some longevity. He knows how to not party himself out. Who gets to call themselves a musician? It's a 7-year-old girl writing songs with AI in Suno. Again, this is getting to the statement that I made about shortcuts, or shortcuts being, I purposely put that in that list because that's starting to come up a lot more these days as well. Because, you have the drag and drop guys, which is a category that I put beat makers in. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And when you're dragging and dropping, you know, um, again, as was pointed out here by Maddie, that starts to raise questions, eyebrows. Um, but if you're producing, even if you're dragging and dropping, then you actually may have elevated yourself to something that I think is a very key component in making music, the ability to produce. But as I started out in this live stream stating, it's a position that is grossly misunderstood, even to this day. I'll tell you what I mean here. Let me catch up a little bit more. We get AIs that make second grade versions of what we do instead of getting AIs that would make it easy to do what we do. AIs are made for money and control, not for people. Can't really argue that. Mike, did you catch my first comment above about music being on a higher level? And musicians are those who are aware and awake to music's cosmic, mathematical, and spiritual being. Scott, I didn't see that, but well put. As a matter of fact, can I, I wish I could pin things. What a very well put statement. What can I do here? Well, yeah, I can pin it. I like that one. I like that one because this is the truth of it. This is something that cannot be done, and this ties into Benny's statement about money and control because it's a degradation every time. It's a copy of a copy of a copy. It just gets worse as we go down the line. Or Maddie says the guy that has spent 4 decades learning guitar, vocal, songwriting, and production, and spent every extra dollar into his art. Yeah, yeah. I see that guy every time I look in the mirror. Frankly, um, yeah, yeah, that sounds pretty close to description. Yeah, yeah, you hit it on the nose there, really, Scott, with that, especially regarding the cosmic mathematical aspects of it, because music is mathematical. Once you understand that concept, then it frees up a lot of things. If you have a head for mathematics, and it frees up a lot of things. But producers are really production is really a threatening thing because it breaks the old visual model of music. Um, for example, visual models are, real life things. A guitarist on stage. A guitarist on stage, that's easy to understand. As well, in other words, it's a guy on stage with a guitar. A drummer playing drums, that looks like effort, a workout. If you ever watch any drummer, by by the end of the show, there's empty water bottles around them, sweat towels everywhere. It was a workout. And so from the visual perception, that's a workout. That's something. Think of every picture that you ever saw of a producer. Usually a guy sitting behind a board, like, or on the phone, or something along those lines, or like this. It does not present itself well as a visual model. It just doesn't. It's not a good image. And when the labor becomes invisible, people assume that it doesn't exist. It's even a famous quote by Michael Jackson, who you would think he would know what a producer does, who said, I had to ask Quincy Jones, what is it that Quincy does? Exactly. Because all I see him all the time when I come in the studio, he's on the phone. But then he began to understand what Quincy was doing. He was on the phone calling musicians up. He was like, hey, Stanley Clark, I need you to come over and play bass on this song. Or I want to, bring in Steve Lukather, or bring in all these different musicians in order that he was producing. It was work in itself. Those guys weren't going to just come, call him, hey, is Mike doing something? Well, maybe some of them did, but still. it was working itself. And, you know, producers do stuff like that, of course, but they also choose harmony. They shape the rhythm, they sculpt the tone, they control the dynamics, and they design emotional arcs in the music. Those, in my mind, as I sat through and thought about what are the key things that I do as a music producer, those are the key things that are there. And each one of those, learning harmony. Choosing harmony means you need to have an understanding of harmony. And that takes years. If you grew up in the black church, then you got a good leg up, because especially if you were in the choir, because you learned harmony. That was one place. Um, Rhythm, understanding, rhythm and its effect, sculpting the tone, the sound of a timbale, the sound of the synthesizer, the tone of a guitar, um, the dynamics, which is something that I was saying that AI songs cannot do, because their dynamics get cut off in the higher frequencies, just shelved, flat, just shelved, and understanding that those dynamics, those peaks that occur there, in those frequencies that some would say are only a dog could hear, but those are some of the things that are there by choice or by accident in order to create the next thing, the emotional arcs of the song. Um, Now, this is done during and after the sound is captured. So the first thing a producer does is capturing the sound to tape. And the next thing is to sculpt that sound once it's recorded. Some of the really great engineers of the 1970s were really good at capturing sound, because they had backgrounds, military backgrounds, a lot of them in sonar work, for example. So that's why the sound of some of those, like the Eagles, comes to mind. Some of the, like Hotel California. The reason that album has that sound to it is really attributed to the producer engineer. The producer engineer is really um, the backbone of a lot of those albums. And I think that a lot of people, again, some musicians, it feels like it's cheating to, you know, sit back and sculpt the sound or mix. Like, you're not really, putting a lot of the effort in this, and yet you get the producer of the year award. What did you do? But again, this comes about from this weird misunderstanding of what a producer is. I saw this guy again. I was saying in the beginning, that was questioning whether or not Dr. Dre was a musician or not. and I said, this is a guy who does not understand the harmony, rhythm, tone, dynamics, uh, sculpting the arc of the sound of the song and the sound. Let me catch up here. Whoa, how far back am I? It's like a lyric from a long time ago, Mike says. Music made in an abandoned studio on modern technology. Video killed the radio star long ago. Spotify will starve the next generation. Yeah, it already is. Cheers to the guitar crew. Cheers to you too, Mike. The thing is, Benny says, Once you begin to understand the language of music, you can come up with new things that have never been done before. It ain't easy, but you can. All you have to do, AI can only imitate, and it can only imitate its inputs. It's only as strong as what its input because it doesn't create, and it only learns through inputs. And the human mind can learn through inputs and then take those inputs and rearrange them in ways that others had not seen before. That is the power of the human mind over AI, and that extends to music. I'm just going to, May says, I'm just going to start singing flat and putting weird shit in my music so people know it's made by a human. I think there was a group called Devo that already did that. Mike, what's your thoughts on Rick Allen, the drummer of Def Leppard, with losing his arm and then having a huge comeback career? Well, that was interesting because that's from my era. I mean, MTV made a big deal about that when he had that accident. I remember it very, very, very clearly. And then they had the kid where they showed him playing with the new electric kid where he only had his one arm, and um, I still don't to this day. Uh, it's just, there was they were putting a lot of energy into it, and it's a great story. The guy said, "I'm not." It's a comeback kid story, but they were putting a lot of energy into it. So you know how I feel about when they put a lot of energy into things. You just have to start saying, "Why are they putting a lot of energy into this?" Either that or do a live acoustic album to video and tape with heaps of mistakes in it. Yeah, it's like then that's why I in my recordings in the rooms that I'm recording, I will leave things in again because these are the things that sometimes will make a song have those dynamics, that AI wouldn't think of because it's not created in an artificial environment. It's created in a real environment where you have the the laws of thermodynamics, chaos and disorder, and working, and that's great. You know, that's great. I don't know. I don't know how this drift towards sterility occurred in the music business, but you know, it's there. Dre is an interesting lightning rod in that conversation I saw on YouTube because he exposes the flaw in the argument regarding producers not doing anything immediately. And to answer, he won't watch it, but that guy on Instagram, to answer your question, the guy plays instruments. Uh, you know, he plays the Moog, and not only does he play the Moog, but he knew how to program it as well in order to get those Parliament funkadelic sounds that he was trying to put into his hip hop records. He obviously understands rhythm deeply. That's the foundation of his music. Um, he uses the studio as an instrument as opposed to him being a guitarist or a drummer or a bassist. The studio, every aspect of it, the equipment, board. He shapes performances because he knows how performances are he has an eye to the visual also when he's recording because he knows that it's going to be used in a visual medium at some point, a music video, for example. And he hears things that others don't, obviously, because some of his records, like The Chronic, uh, had a sonic quality to it that I hadn't heard at that time. But even he didn't play, the piano or drums. The argument against him not being a real musician would fail because musicianship is not defined by how many instruments you physically touch. It's designed by your musical decision making. And when people say he's just a beat maker, what they're really uncomfortable with is the idea that music can be written without a traditional band hierarchy, for example. Whereas the Rolling Stones supposedly went to Memphis and supposedly recorded an album there in 2 days, although nobody saw them with any instruments, nobody saw them, uh, recording in the studio. There's no footage of that, but anyway, but that's a hierarchy. There's a band hierarchy, whereas a Dr. Dre type producer is just him, you know. And again, because we're so set on putting labels on things and classifying things and ranking things, we tend to have these thoughts. Not we, not me personally, because I don't, but I can understand how that can come about. I know where that comes from. Huge fan of Devo. Yeah, I like Devo because my brother loved them. The first Devo album, I mean, before they became an MTV smash, I mean, their first stuff, my brother listened to all of that. Cars, Devo, Blondie, you name it. My brother had those albums. And so I grew up listening. He's 3 years my senior. So I was pretty hip for my age because I had an older brother that had good taste. How can I market my channel as crap, but at least it's not AI? Man, just be. It's like I've been saying, just be you. And also, you know, your the AI stuff. It's going to be AI because there's always a tell. It's either in the artwork that's in the title not making sense, or or how it's presented. Breaking news. If you see a J card, a card on YouTube that says breaking news, don't click on that. That's AI. I love Parliament's Dr. Funkenstein and Mothership albums. Yeah, man. I It was Drake Gooseby, the guy who really introduced me to guitar playing, who had those albums. I never heard them until I was in 10th grade because my parents didn't listen to it. And I never heard it. um, you know, it's interesting, this kind of this thinking persists because a few reasons. It's scarcity thinking. If music is a sum if music is a sum zero game, then someone else legitimacy will feel like a threat. What do I mean by that? Honestly, again, because we rank things in our minds, we do it in subconsciously. Anything that we perceive as a threat to our viewpoint, we're going to rank that low. We're going to rank that low. The loss of gatekeeping, I've talked about that before. Technology removes permission. You don't need approval from anybody to create anymore. Whereas before, you needed the gatekeepers to give you the keys to the Magic Kingdom. And in that kingdom, there were rules. In the Wild Wild West we have now, there are no rules. There are no gatekeepers. And identity collapse would be the third reason why this mindset continues to linger. It's if a musician no longer means one thing, some people will feel untethered, unmoored, lost. Because what does it mean? I'm a musician. Well, that meaning could lose all meaning, if a beat maker is a musician and a first string violinist is considered a musician. You understand? Again, depending upon your point of view and your ranking, you understand how that could leave somebody, in a higher ranking, in my mind at least, feel, and in their minds as well, feel a little untethered. It's not. It's not really disrespect shown towards the producer. What it really comes down to is just a protecting of one's, creative space, a sense of self, so to speak. And again, you don't have to be a musician to feel that way. There are plenty of non-musicians out there who do that kind of ranking as well. They'll consider, well, this person is, this guy is absolutely, a genius. Whereas this person may be doing the same thing, but is in a different genre that they don't consider to be important. We do. It's human nature. It's human nature. You know, a beat maker can be a producer. A producer can certainly be a musician. And a musician can be none of those things and still create beautiful work. Isn't that interesting how that works? Um, you don't have to be a producer or a beat maker to be a musician. You just have to be creative and create something and teach yourself and start to learn and understand about you know the aspects of music creation, and in a way you'll become a producer. You'll become a producer. These aren't ranks. These aren't things to be ranked. These are roles. I have no need for beat production. I did some, like I have a TV. I was going to pull up one up from my sizzle reel. I was going to pull up one of, I just didn't get around to it. One of my commercials that I did for Dove in Indonesia, and that was basically me, doing a beat and not a lot of musicality to it. But I appreciated in that process and listening to the beats and okay, this is how it's done. It's like this, and these are the common sounds. And again, it was my production knowledge that allowed me to be able to work in that genre. Once you learn production, and this is the thing that people don't seem to be able to understand, is that you have the ability really to reach out to more than what it is that you do, or that you thought you did. You start to expand your horizons, your musical genres that you can work within. It's a very interesting thing. you know. But a producer is a role, a musician is a role, a beat maker is a role. If we look at them as roles and not as ranks, then we can have a more pleasant conversation amongst ourselves, or more honest, certainly a more honest discussion. But certainly it will change our perceptions when we listen, or when we come across a guy who says, hey, I'm a concert pianist, as opposed to a guy that we meet and say, hey, I'm a beat producer, or a beat maker. I think if you look at it from that viewpoint, well, that's a role. That guy has a role to play in the scheme of things, and that guy has a woman, the guy or girl has that role in the scheme of things. And I think then, you know, you'll see that these roles overlap sometimes, but they're just roles. And it's not that anybody is better. Of course, there's there, and then there's people who are bad in their roles. We've certainly seen a lot of Hollywood movies where the lead actor was not really good in their role. That Snow White movie with uh, with that actress who plays Wonder Woman, I think would be a good example of that. But their roles nonetheless. And then there's some people who are just really good in those roles. And like a Bob Clearmountain or Dr. Dre, for example. And if you look at it like that, then I think, or you explain it to people like that, or if you try to get people to have that type of viewpoint, I think you'll have a little bit more musical appreciation for people and what they do in their roles, and maybe you'll have a better understanding of how each one of those roles fit. Not every musician is a virtuoso. That is correct. Would you consider Civil War Army drummers back in the 1860s musicians? Yeah, because they had to learn when you were a drummer in that army, you had to you had to learn the drum for roll call, the drum for retreat. That was an important one. The one for march. You had to learn these, and these are basically songs that you. So it's just like okay, we're gonna launch into battle on all of my love. But if you hear, when the levee breaks, time to retreat, lads. It's a musical equivalent of that. So yeah, I consider them musicians. Sure, sure. They certainly had a role to play. Believe me, I'd be keeping my ears on those drummers if I was in the 1860s uh, battle. I was watching getting into my file kind of things. A documentary about that period of time, exactly from 1849 till what did they say, roughly 1870. And they showed a map of the world at that time, and they put red dots where there was conflicts occurring during that time period. And you begin to realize that from 1849 till 1870 was the First World War, and it blew my mind. History is only the stories told by the winners or the survivors, usually the winners. And the truth of the matter is that the First World War really occurred during the 18 that period, the 19th century. Look, just going on the amount of conflicts and the things that were going on. And uh, that's an amazing thing. We were taught that the First World War really occurred uh, from 1914 to 1918, but that's not true. There was a bigger conflict worldwide that was occurring during that 19th century period that killed hundreds of millions of people. Hundreds of Kit Kats. Right into By Winter by Tori Amos. No one will mess with you. Right into with Winter by Tori Amos. No one will mess with you. I got you right into battle. I got you, Kit Kats. That's a good one too. The old '90s TV show Civil War Journal was such a good watch. Yeah. So yeah, dig that, man. That blew my mind. I watched that documentary, true history documentary, and you can watch, come to that conclusion yourself. It's not hard to see that that's what happened. And man, it leads to questions, but those are for another time. Charlie Watts collected Civil War relics. God bless his soul. Charlie Watts looked like he came from the Civil War there towards the end. And Lemmy, yeah, I know about that. I know about Lemmy and Civil War. That's funny. Yeah, everybody's got their thing. Everybody's got something they want to collect. I guess Beanie Babies are out of fashion now. Moon rocks, pet rocks, moon rings. I can think of some of the stuff when I was a kid. Mood rings, mood rings. You guys remember mood rings? Oh my gosh, whatever happened to that? I should come out. I should reintroduce mood rings again because this younger generation they don't know. Oh man, it's funny, guys. The thoughts that I have, and that was one. Just a healthier way of thinking about it. When someone insists on drawing hard lines around creativity, it usually says less about the artist they're criticizing and a little bit more about the speaker's own unresolved relationship with change or with that genre or something along those lines. Music doesn't need defining, music needs curiosity. It's always needed curiosity. Hey, what if we could get this guitar thing a little bit louder? How can we do that? Or hey, what would this song sound like instead of using traditional horns, using keyboard horns? It's curiosity. AI is not going to do that. It's not going to ask those kind of questions because it does not have the ability to do that. That curiosity is yet another aspect of lack in AI. You know, we have to think of it as roles. There are roles to play in music, and where there again, like I said, good roles, good those that are good at the role, and those who are bad at the role, and those who are just okay at the role. I like to consider myself in the latter of that group, personally, but uh, certainly there are roles. And if you look at them like roles instead of like, you know, anything, a ranking of whatever sort, then again, I think your understanding of music in general will improve. Your viewpoint, your outlook, the way that you perceive it, the way that you take in your inputs. Because once you start ranking a thing low, it just doesn't rank, mate. My British friend used to say. It's got to rank because the minute you start ranking things out, you are not having any kind of curiosity, and so you might as well be using Suno. You might as well if you've lost your curiosity. You know, if I see, well, maybe this song needs a different role in it. The producer on the phone calling those musicians because they fit a role that he was staging. He was setting a sonic stage, a production producer, right? Yeah. And with that kind of mindset, these are roles. I need this kind of bass player for this kind of song. I need this kind of drummer for this kind of song. I need this kind of actor for this kind of role. I need this kind of cameraman for this kind of lighting guy for this kind of. You understand what I mean? If you look at them as roles, then you're not ranking anymore. You begin to expand your understanding of this wonderful thing that we call music production, and you will be able to then expand your curiosity. Well, what about this role? I always kind of ranked it low, but maybe let me go check it out a little bit and see, what it takes in order to do it. You might find out that it takes a little bit more effort than you thought. You might just find out. Just saying. Mike, did the Japanese ever get into cigar box guitar? Oh, sure, sure, yeah. You can go to Ishibashi. No, Ishibashi is that the camera? Yeah, Ishibashi, and you can get those. You can find those in a section. Um, Lemmy was a guitar roadie for Hendrix. Yep. When you heard UK live recordings of Hendrix, remember Lenny tuned that guitar. That's funny. Well, you know, music industry then was an interesting place. There's a lot of things, people that were intertwined in weird ways. Their paths crossed in a lot of strange ways that make for wonderful stories. You know, that make for wonderful stories. Um, it's very clear that we are moving into a realm, a time where music is being diminished in a lot of ways. And this diminishment comes about because it's being ranked in such a way that it's diminishing. And yet, as long as there's human civilization, music will always continue and go on. There will always be some guy, some girl, somewhere that is going to have that curiosity and want to produce that curiosity in such a way that others can share in it. So they can AI the heck out of stuff. They can change the name of their stupid DAWs to, Fender or whatever. They can do all these things to corporatize and to, I don't want to use a Fender monikered DAW. That does not appeal to me. That does not scream to me, oh boy, this is going to be sweet. Personas, you know, I know where they're, we all know Personas. We know that company very well. But Personas always, and I've been using Persona stuff for decades. Um, Personas, the name itself is, not really attached to anything other than its history. When you start putting Fender to that, that's attaching a whole lot of other stuff that may or may not be, you know, appealing. And the more I sit here and think about it, the less I am appealed by it. I am really curious to see what goes with this in the future. Um, but anyway, they can AI the crap out of things. They can change the name and stuff. But again, it's always going to be a guy or girl, whatever recording anyway, that's going to be the next thing. And AI is never going to be that. Somebody was saying, well, one of the biggest songs on YouTube is an AI song. And I just have to say to you, no, don't say that, Michael. That's mean. Let's just say that the general masses out there um, are going to consume whatever the man puts in front of them. And they are not going to have the ability, like you and I do, to have the discernment to distinguish between slop and true art. And that's only because if you've never tasted filet mignon, then, you've had a McDonald's diet all your life, then the concept of filet mignon is going to mean nothing to you. It's going to be meaningless. It's not even going to be aspirational because you don't even know about it. Hey, that was good. That worked out. I actually worded that quite well. Yes, that made sense. Then he says Fender isn't exactly famous for being reliable with digital products. That's the other thing. That's the other thing. They have had no success in that field whatsoever. Whatsoever. You know. And it's just weird branding. It is just, Studio One by Fender, that wouldn't have worked. Anytime you put Fender into the mix, it just kind of turns. I know some guys it turns on, not me. It actually makes me wince a little bit. You're using that Fender DAW. See, that doesn't sound good. And also because it's Fender now, if you're not, you're going to assume, well, this must be for guitars. I'm not kidding. It's that kind of basic, kindergarten level of thinking, but it does occur a lot more than you think. And a lot of people I know would look at that and say, okay, the Fender DAW is for rock or for guitar music, whereas Fruity Loops is for beat production. I could see that being a result of that rebranding as well. Yeah. Well, guys, I am so glad to be here with you guys these Wednesdays here on the Wednesday Night Hump here on the channel. I went to the printer today and I was so pleased. I had all of my artwork. I even had all the notes of how I wanted it output, had it all together. And he looked at me and he said, where are the on these discs? The plan is to overlay a sticker of the artwork on top of this. And he said, where's the stickers? And I completely forgot to buy them. So I said, hold that thought. Walked about 10 minutes from his shop to a shop that sells those and said, hey guys, do you have the CD stickers? I got something at the printer I want to use them for. And the guy says, we're out of stock. So I've got all the artwork for the Asanoki CD is done. It's actually literally at the printers. He has it. The trick is it's not going to get printed out. I'm not going to be able to do that at that part of this task until I get those CD stickers. So yeah, that's the update on the Asanoki CD. But the project is coming along very nicely. And when I do have it ready for release, I would appreciate so much if you guys would support me by picking up a copy. Thank you to the Amsterdam Guitar Man. Thank you guys. Thank you so much for showing up this evening. Take care, guys. I will certainly, God willing, see you this Sunday evening at Sunday at Mike's, 11 p.m. Central European Time. Same bad time, same bad channel. You guys take care till then. God bless each of you. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Maddie, for moderating. You guys be good. Take care, everybody.